Christchurch changes at night. It turns from a humming, bustling city into madness. Drunken teens and adults stumble down streets, and it's the emergency services that have to pick up the pieces when things go wrong. I'm Marcus Gibbs. Tonight on Street Stories, I'm looking at whether Christchurch has an alcohol culture. For the last 2.5 years, I've been reporting on police cracking down on revellers. But how bad is the problem? And away from the streets, away from the bars, what's the impact on a family when a mother is addicted to alcohol? All this and more, tonight on Street Stories. Christchurch has a thriving nightlife. Bars are often filled with happy punters. Many people see drinking as a way to unwind after a tough day. The bars may be dimly lit, but the dark side of alcohol is nowhere to be seen. The laughter pours out with every glass consumed. Away from the alcohol-infused lights, Christchurch's emergency services have to deal with the negative effects of alcohol. To assess Christchurch's drinking culture, we need to take a look back. Friday night, 2 years ago, Christchurch police took CTV News for a ride around the city. It wasn't a special night, there were no significant celebrations on in town, but the drunk drivers were out on the roads.
I've seen people that have just been unable to stand. They've been in their cars driving and they've stopped and couldn't even stand when they got out of their vehicle. After one pint, this 19-year-old was under the limit, but with a zero tolerance for underage drinkers, he was taken to the booze bus.
Because it's zero tolerance now these days for drivers under 20, which is bullshit, I now have to wait 4 hours before I get to go home and get fucking stoned.
He was fined for no registration, no warrant, and driving on a restricted licence after 10 p.m. Ironically, he wasn't impressed with the number of drivers over the limit.
It's a shocking number of people with the amount of deaths we've had in the start of 2012 already, and even last year's toll was pretty bad. So no, it's not good at all.
You're one of those people?
I am one of those people. Second time lucky, there ain't going to be a third time.
Police weren't impressed either.
Number 6 has just been taken onto the bus, so that's 6 been processed so far tonight, and I think we started here about 10:30, and it's just 12:30 now. So not very good odds really. Looks like number 7 might be just coming on the bus as well. So they just keep coming. An
hour or so later, a staggering 9 had already been caught for breaking the drink driving laws.
9 for us, I guess, from our work point of view, is a good night. We've got them off the roads, but probably from a public perspective, it's not a good night that we've been able to pick up that many from one checkpoint.
As we left the bus, 11 drink drivers had been caught and taken off the roads. That number seems high, but as it turns out, it really isn't.
It's been quite a typical night for us, the typical Friday night.
Easter weekend came and went. Police were happy no one died on the roads, but a huge number of people were caught drink driving.
This weekend, or over the Easter weekend, we got 47 drunks on our roads. Each one of those is a potential killer. So I guess it's fair to say there's a little bit of luck involved in that there's no fatalities in Canterbury this year.
2 weeks later, I was out with the new Riccarton neighbourhood policing team. Teenagers had been partying in the suburb the night before, and it wasn't long before officers came across discarded bottles.
It's like this one here, they just left here, broken. I mean, all of it is dangerous. Whether you throw it, you leave it, or you bust it. It's all dangerous behaviour. Has a power of arrest, so people can expect to be locked up for this sort of thing.
This man was deaf and couldn't talk, but that was no excuse for breaching the liquor ban. His water bottle had been replaced with a bourbon and coke mix.
Infringement notice, $55 for not wearing a bike helmet, and he's in the middle of a liquor ban. So today I've chose to warn him on that matter, but he'll get the notice. He also had a can of Woodstock in his backpack, which is unopened, which he can keep. Told him to enjoy it later on tonight, but he was quite cooperative, and that's all we want. We just want a bit of cooperation.
By the end of 2012, police were announcing a campaign to target those breaching liquor bans.
Liquor ban enforcement is something that we're going to focus on. If you are in a liquor ban area, and there are many of them in Christchurch, and you're drinking, you can expect to be arrested and you may be charged.
But did the new measures help to change Christchurch's alcohol culture? After problems in previous years, Christchurch police were taking no chances at last November's Cup Day. They made sure for the first time a temporary liquor ban was set up around Addington Raceway. Normally the day is reserved for drunken clowns, but surprisingly, only one person was arrested for breaching the liquor ban. CTV News was there as he was forced to tip out his drink. It had just gone 4 on the Lindau lawn, and after a day of racing and tipping back the booze, this lot weren't showing any signs of slowing down.
How many drinks have I had? I've had about
A lot.
8. Or close 5 with my wife. A lot.
Your wife?
Flush with cash from big wins, punters were also enjoying themselves away from the main event. But the night was far from over.
We'll probably go back to the flat and have a couple more drinks. Gonna go all out tonight. Hi, bro. May as well. Only cup week once a year.
Fox and Ferret staff were applauding the police for their efforts to control the madness.
It's not too bad. Like, our security are pretty good at keeping a lid on things. Maybe out on the streets you have your classic problems, but I think with liquor ban that will improve things.
During the ride home, the public were behaving themselves.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Everyone was passing a breath test with ease, which kept Christchurch police staff happy.
Last year we had two very serious crashes with patrons leaving the Addington Racecourse, both potentially fatal. We didn't want to see that happen again, and luckily so far so good.
Police are now pressing the Christchurch City Council to make the ban permanent, to keep trouble out of future events. Christmas time normally means trouble for emergency staff when end-of-year dinners turn into drinks. But when CTV tagged along with St John at the end of last year, it was just a quiet Friday night. Suddenly, a 25-year-old male tried to fight a window, but the window came out of it better off.
He's been drinking and has kicked a window. He's locked himself out and kicked a door in. He's bleeding from the bottom of his foot. And they say the bleeding is under control, so we're going to go along and have a look and see if he needs any further assessment or treatment.
Once we arrived at the address, this young man had to awkwardly climb out of his window. He'd lost his key, so had to break into his own home. He'd taped his foot up as best as he could, but underneath the homemade bandage, the paramedic found a deep cut.
Oh, well, you're going to need to go to hospital, young man. You're going to need some stitches.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you any injuries anywhere else?
No, that's it.
That's it? Okay, so it's going to need some stitches or staples in there.
St Patrick's Day is another big drinking holiday, but this year police were happy with the crowd's behaviour. Perhaps it was due to the high police presence, or that the holiday fell on a Monday, but the night was relatively uneventful for police.
Everyone's pretty happy over there at the moment, and in other places we've been. A lot of green around, a lot of Irish, which is always good to see on St Paddy's Day. From here it's just about managing that drinking and that drinking culture.
So much for celebrating rich ancestry and all things Irish. The night instead seems like another excuse to get drunk.
I don't think any of New Zealand really knows the meaning of St Patrick's Day. I think people just use that as an excuse to get pissed. But that's fucking all right, you know?
Christchurch police had extra staff rostered on for the shift, but the punters behaved themselves and only 3 people were arrested. Sergeant Ben Fitzpatrick from Christchurch Police believes the city still has a problem.
It's a fairly typical attitude in New Zealand that there's not a drinking culture, where clearly there is, but again it depends on who you're comparing us with. But there are certainly binge drinking aspects of our culture that I would like to see addressed.
Since the earthquakes, police have noticed Cantabrians are more often than not drinking at home instead of heading to the nearest pub.
A lot of them are closed down to some bigger parties where we're getting in excess of 100 people attending. So that combined with a lot of alcohol can cause some issues later in the night.
While the public face of alcohol wears a smile, there's a less attractive side hidden from view. Coming up, what does the private face of alcohol look like?
She was being disorderly out in the public or getting beaten up because she was so drunk, and they'd take her wallet and rob her.
Behind closed doors, alcohol is leaving a nasty stain on people's lives. 19-year-old Amy knows only too well what happens when the drink consumes a person. Her mother has been an alcoholic for close to a decade. That's 9 years of drunken rampages, abuse, and even prison time. It all started when Amy's mother took her for a drink at the mall when she was just 10 years old.
She had a wine and I had a juice. She had another wine and then another wine. She got really drunk.
For the first 9 years of her life, her mother was loving and caring. 10 years ago, that person disappeared.
Some days were good, some days were bad. You never know what's going to happen. It was really hard coming home from school. I'd dread it. I'd absolutely dread coming home from school. I'd never know whether she'd be drunk or not. And some nights she wouldn't come home.
It was often those nights that the police would be involved.
She was being disorderly out in the public or getting beaten up because she was so drunk, and they'd take her wallet and rob her.
After racking up multiple drink driving charges, her mother spent 9 months in prison.
At that stage there was a lot of shame around her mother's behaviour. Amy would tell me stories about, mum sort of biking home for places and falling off into the gutter, and she would be walking home from school with friends and there'd be an ambulance there.
The Familial Trust is a counselling centre for families of people with addictions. Amy has been attending regularly since she was 9 years old. She's not the only teenager to have an alcoholic parent.
Alcohol is by far the biggest addiction in Christchurch. The pee and the synthetics and that sort of stuff come and go, but alcohol is definitely what we see the most of.
Amy's counsellor says each alcoholic affects at least 10 people on average. Children are the most vulnerable around alcoholics.
People come home and there's violence, and the children are privy to hearing and seeing a lot of things that children shouldn't see or hear, and that affects them in all areas of their life. So the whole family actually does get affected in a negative way.
Each week the Familial Trust runs a fun night for the children of addicts. Amy volunteers here, helping up to 40 young people a week. The beauty of this group is that they've all experienced similar issues.
So children growing up in addicted families often have to grow up too quickly. They're taking on really adult issues. So all the leaders, and like Amy, it's a chance for her to just come along, be a goofball, have some fun and just be a kid herself.
A lot of my friends don't know about it, so this is one place I can talk freely about it and get upset and cry, and my one place to, get angry.
So children can be traumatised and go to school and be expected to concentrate at school, but they're constantly thinking about what's going on at home and what's going to be at home when they get home, what's going to happen when mum or dad gets home after having a few drinks.
This is a place for them to unwind and mix with people who know what they're going through.
The main perspective of that group is just allowing these children to be children and have fun when they can't do that out there in their real world.
It affects every single part of their life. They can't do anything normally. Just coming home, which should be a safe sanctuary for family members and especially children, that isn't there anymore when you have an alcoholic parent.
It's not just a little part of a person's life, it affects them in all areas of their life, even in friendships, and the secrets and the shame that people carry. And I think over the years Amy has carried a fair bit of shame around her mum's drinking.
Some of Karen's young clients end up depending on alcohol or other vices, just like their parents. However, Amy's managed to cut the problem completely out of her life.
You make your own choices in life, and it's just a shame that her actions have consequences, and those consequences have affected me. But that doesn't mean that I need to go down that route as well.
What's your relationship with her now?
I don't really have a relationship with her. I think that was destroyed a long time ago.
She's studying now with goals of working in her dream industry, but at the back of her mind always is her mother. Despite the university social life, she doesn't drink, unlike her friends who don't hold back.
People just abuse it, and they just think it's something to do on a Friday night and a Saturday night. They've never seen the dark side to it, so they think it's all right to drink until you vomit or till you get into bad situations.
Amy's one of many who have grown up with an alcoholic as a parent.
I think there's a lot more than that we're aware of. I mean, people they hide it. I mean, I hid it from my friends for 5 years when I was at high school. People don't want to talk about it. So it's really only this year that I've found people my own age that have parents in addiction.
Amy's come to accept that at the rate her mother is drinking, she won't be alive in 10 years' time.
You can't ruin your body with alcohol like that. Drinking so much and you're completely ruining all your organs, your liver. I don't expect her to live for that much longer.
Professor Doug Salmon founded the National Addiction Centre. Alcoholics are part of his everyday work. He says the country's attitude to alcohol is bizarre, with at least 700,000 people drinking heavily. Professor Salmon says at least 400,000 New Zealanders would meet the criteria for having an alcoholic disorder. Remember, it's estimated each alcoholic affects 10 people, many of whom could be children.
It's almost like as a country we're away with the fairies. And it's almost because we don't want it to be true. We would really like it if our most favourite recreational drug, alcohol, is also a health tonic. And unfortunately, that's just not the case.
19% of alcohol-related admissions at Christchurch Hospital's emergency department are people aged between 15 and 19 years old. Another 25% are aged between 25 and 29. Is this the start of life as an alcoholic? What's scary is that alcohol-related admissions are increasing by about 8% a year.
To turn up to a hospital like across the road here, if you turn up at ED as an alcoholic saying you want help, you're not going to get the kind of immediate help that you would get if you turned up at ED with chest pain. Alcoholism is not seen as a proper disorder. It's seen as something that's self-inflicted.
Professor Salmon's calling for further government funding to help people stuck in a cycle of addiction.
Although public health approaches will certainly help those most severe alcoholics, we also need very good treatment for people who are very deep in the black hole of alcohol addiction.
Coming up, who's to blame for the city's alcohol problems? Health experts and the hospitality industry face off.
That's why we say don't pick on us, pick on where the problem starts, and the problem is cheap alcohol.
Is alcohol still a problem in Christchurch? Amy thinks so, but then again she has witnessed the dark side of the drug. Based on our reporting, things seem to be improving, but are they an accurate reflection of the issue? Professor Doug Salmon has another view. He says Christchurch has an alcohol culture and has had one for many years. Paint a picture for me what it was like back before the earthquakes.
Prior to the earthquakes, when there was a CBD, the city was not somewhere that people necessarily felt safe. It was in many ways a big party time where there was considerable amount of violence, and the emergency department of Christchurch Hospital continued to put out news reports that they were seeing a lot of unnecessary alcohol-related harm, and a lot of it was coming from the CBD.
The hospitality industry completely disagrees. How bad was the central city's nightlife before the earthquakes?
It wasn't bad because in 2008 we'd already put in an alcohol accord with the police and the city council, and so that was we had a one-way door at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it wasn't. I mean, there was the odd troubles we'd had, but we'd actually reduced any problems by about 20%.
But there were a lot of people on Friday, Saturday nights who were drunk in the central city.
Yeah, but they weren't allowed in bars. I mean, and the police were picking them up and dealing with them pretty well. I mean, I don't think that's really changed. It's just it's moved out of the city. But the people that have preloaded before they've come into a bar, they're preloaded before they get into the city. And that is still happening because of the cheap alcohol available from supermarkets. But it's not. I don't think it was a really bad problem prior to the earthquake. I don't think anything's changed in that way.
Back then the Law Commission was wanting to make changes because the problem was so bad.
The Law Commission undertook one of the most comprehensive reviews of alcohol in New Zealand's history. In fact, it was the most comprehensive review. They looked at the evidence and they came up with a series of recommendations about how New Zealand could improve things and get rid of the unnecessary alcohol-related harm that was occurring.
Health experts argue the changes put in place weren't strong enough.
We were therefore very disappointed when the so-called alcohol reform bill came out, which only had half a reform in it, and that was to look at increasing the purchase age for off-licence, so a split age. That was subsequently defeated in Parliament, which left an alcohol reform bill as a bill with essentially no reform in it, and we referred to it then as the alcohol non-reform bill.
So 4 years later now, has anything changed for the better?
No, nothing substantial. There has been some, what we've termed tinkerings with alcohol law, but there has yet to be a major reform.
What you've seen tonight is a snapshot of Christchurch's drinking culture, but the hospitality industry is denying the city has a problem. How bad do you think the city's alcohol problem is at the moment? Does it have one?
From the hospitality industry view, point is that there isn't we don't have an alcohol problem. If health people will say there is, and if they will agree with me, they've agreed that the biggest problem is cheap alcohol and people preloading.
This is the one thing health officials and the hospitality industry agree on. Professor Doug Salmon says preloading on cheap drinks sold at supermarkets contributes to the city's alcohol problem.
Supermarkets are the retailers of about 70% of alcohol in New Zealand. They are the biggest drug dealers in the country, and they're flogging alcohol at very cheap prices.
That's why we say don't pick on us, pick on where the problem starts, and the problem is cheap alcohol. There's such a big price differential in alcohol from a supermarket to buying. If you buy a dozen Heineken in a supermarket for $20 or $22 and you have to pay $8 or $9 in a bar, that's the problem. It's too cheap.
And of course this is undermining hospitality industry profit. So the hospitality industry do have an issue around supermarket sales, particularly the seriously discounted alcohol sales.
But the hospitality industry says safety comes first, and they're not worried about losing money to the supermarkets.
No, we're worried. We want people coming in, and it's been the same profit margin for 50 years, same margin. So nothing's changed in our situation. But what we're worried about is people preloading on alcohol sold below cost.
The Retailers Association responded on behalf of the supermarket sector. A spokesperson says it's unfair to compare the price of alcohol sold in a bar, cafe or restaurant to supermarkets, where bulk buying allows cheaper priced alcohol. The association's view is New Zealand's binge drinking culture is an issue to be addressed collectively, but responsibility rests with the individual. Peter Morrison doesn't accept the hospitality industry is to blame. A local alcohol policy for Christchurch could have helped to take alcohol-related crime out of the city. It was mooted as a way to restrict when and where alcohol could be sold.
Oh, well, we want to sell drinks, but we're very regulated, so we can only serve to people that are not intoxicated, and it's just, as I said, it's not worth them losing their licence to serve intoxicated people.
More than 4,000 public submissions were received. Many opposed the proposal to only allow bars to stay open until 3 a.m. The majority would have to close by 1 in the morning. Because of the strong opposition, changes were put in place, including allowing nightclubs in the central city to stay open until 4 a.m. But the City Council put the draft LAP on hold last month, pending the outcome of legal action in other parts of the country.
I found it quite frightening when I heard that the City Council here in Christchurch were putting off the LAP, but I could understand why Leanne Dalziel's doing it, because she's savvy and she knows just how powerful this industry are. But what we've seen is that the alcohol industry are going to fight this to the death. They're going to take it to court and they're going to pick off those councils that look weak and those councils which dare to bring in something that is going to have an impact on their business.
Professor Salmon believes the only way the drinking culture will change is if the government acts.
What we need is a government that will actually do what the people of New Zealand want, and that is to have a safer, healthier society. And we need a government that will lead on alcohol reform. And it's only a government that can do something about the pricing of alcohol, the marketing of alcohol. These are two of the major drivers of the heavy drinking culture.
Professor Salmon has strong suggestions around what needs to happen before Christchurch loses its alcohol culture. He wants the drink driving limit to be lowered. He'd also like to see alcohol prices to be increased. He likens it to the war against tobacco. New Zealanders were once sceptical anything would change, but the country is now much more rational about tobacco. He hopes in a few years the same will be said for alcohol. While people might be behaving themselves in front of the police when they've been drinking, in broad daylight the drunks are never hard to find. While filming on Lincoln Road, this heavily intoxicated man decided to show off with the camera.
Do a bit of dancing or,
Off the streets, the issue isn't going away. There are many people like Amy's mother who are battling alcohol addictions behind closed doors. It's destroying families, ripping them apart. No matter how it's dressed up, alcohol is an addictive drug. Some people can handle it, but for others, it's life-destroying. It makes me question whether we've struck the right balance. And that's this week's Street Stories.